I'll never forget how quiet that terminal felt that morning. The kind of quiet that only exists before sunrise when the lights are bright, but the world hasn't caught up yet. I remember walking through Concourse D in full uniform, 4 stripes on my shoulders, badge clipped, where it always is, thinking about nothing more dramatic than coffee and a routine departure. My plane was already at the gate. Passengers seated my first officer, probably wondering what was taking me so long. 3 sentences into that walk, everything changed. A voice cut through the air, sharp and certain, telling me to stop. Another sentence followed, colder this time, demanding ID like I was trespassing. And then the one that stuck, the one that still echoes in my head even now: you don't belong here. Yeah, that happened. At first I honestly thought it was a misunderstanding. Airports are tense places, especially early mornings, and I've learned over the years that calm usually fixes things faster than frustration. I stopped, turned, slightly kept my hands visible, did everything the way you're trained to do when someone with authority decides to interrupt your day. I told him I was the captain for Flight 781 Gate D14, said he could check the manifest scan. My badge call airline operations, whatever he needed. I even pointed politely toward the aircraft sitting right there through the glass. Instead of verifying anything, he looked me up and down, slow, deliberate, like he was searching for a reason not to believe me. Anyone can wear a costume, he said, and there was a little smirk on his face when he said it, like he'd already solved the case in his head. I remember thinking, costume, really? But I didn't laugh. I didn't snap. I just repeated myself calmly, because that's what professionals do, right? That's when he stepped closer. You could feel the shift. You know what I mean? The air tightens, people nearby slow down. That invisible line gets crossed. Turn around, he ordered. I asked why not in a challenging way, just asking for a reason, because at that point he still hadn't told me what rule I'd broken. His answer wasn't an explanation. It was a shove. My shoulder hit the glass wall of the jet bridge hard enough that I heard it echo. Hands on the wall, he barked loud enough for passengers and crew to hear. I said clearly, I'm not resisting, there's no reason for force, and I meant it. I raised my palms open, visible textbook compliance. People were watching now. A gate agent stepped forward, hesitant, but brave enough to say it out loud. Officer, that's our captain. We're waiting on him. He waved her off like she was an inconvenience. Didn't even look at her. His attention stayed locked on me, and that's when he twisted my arm behind my back. Not a guiding motion, not control pain. Sharp, immediate. I grunted more out of surprise than anything else, and he yelled, "Stop moving," even though I was standing still. That's when I realized this wasn't about confusion anymore. This was about power. The cuffs came out, cold metal biting into my wrist, and someone in the crowd said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's the pilot, man. What are you doing?" He ignored them. He told me I was being detained for impersonation and failure to comply. Impersonation. I remember that word hitting me harder than the cuffs. I told him it was false, told him again to run my credentials, to call my airline, to call the cockpit, because my first officer was literally sitting in that plane waiting on me. Instead, he forced me forward, one hand pressing between my shoulder blades, steering me away from the gate, away from my aircraft, away from everything I'd worked years to earn. They took me into a small security room off the concourse. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, a metal table bolted to the floor, a camera in the corner that suddenly felt very important. He pushed me down into a chair and tightened the cuffs another notch. I told him he was cutting off circulation. He shrugged and said I'd be fine. Another officer walked by, looked in, asked what was going on. "Fake pilot," he said. "Claims he's a captain." I lifted my cuffed hands slightly and asked again for verification. "Call the cockpit," I said. "Call operations. We can end this right now." He waved it off, said they'd figure out who I really was first. Through the glass, I could see the gate agent on the phone pointing toward the room, her face tight with worry and anger. He noticed too. Stepped out, shut the door halfway, told her to step back. She said my name, said it was on the manifest, said the flight couldn't leave without me. He told her they were handling it. Back inside, he leaned against the table, arms crossed, and said something that told me everything I needed to know. "People think a uniform means respect," he said. "Means you get to walk anywhere you want." I looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "The problem is, you decided I was guilty before you checked anything." For a moment he didn't respond. Then his radio crackled. "Supervisor en route. 2 minutes out." He smiled like he'd just won something. When the supervisor arrived, the energy shifted again. Different kind of authority. He took one look at my uniform, then at the cuffs, then at the officer standing there so sure of himself. "What do we have?" he asked. The officer spoke first, said I was claiming to be a pilot, said my badge looked off, said I was evasive. I corrected him immediately, told the supervisor I'd provided ID and asked for verification. Told him force was used without cause. The supervisor didn't argue. He walked to the computer, typed in my name, and the screen filled in like it was supposed to. He stared at it for a second, then looked at me and said, "You're listed as the operating captain for Flight 781. I exhaled, slow, controlled, because I knew what was coming next. He turned to the officer and asked why I was in cuffs. "Procedure," the officer said. The supervisor shook his head and said, "Procedure is verify first, not force first." He called Airline operations. 30 seconds later, everything I'd been saying for the past 20 minutes was confirmed. "Captain. Assigned. Cleared. Waiting aircraft. Remove the cuffs," the supervisor said. The officer hesitated just long enough to make it clear he didn't like being told that, then unlocked them. My wrists were already red, swelling marks forming that would last for days. I asked for everything to be documented, every second. He nodded and said it would be. That's when the airline executive arrived, Vice President of Operations, tailored suit, focused eyes, phone still in her hand. She took one look at my wrists and her expression hardened. "Did you restrain him?" she asked. The supervisor answered before the officer could. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to the officer and asked on what grounds. He said suspicious behavior. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She said calmly, "You detained a uniformed captain 10 minutes before departure without verifying his credentials and put him in handcuffs in front of passengers." Silence filled the room. She ordered all footage preserved, body cam, security cameras, everything. She asked me if I was fit to fly. I said yes, but I also said this wasn't getting buried. She told me it wouldn't. Then she looked at the supervisor and said they were suspending the department from airline security operations effective immediately. That was the moment you could see the reality hit. Not just for the officer, but for everyone involved. They escorted me back toward the gate and the crowd parted. Some people stared, some nodded. A few clapped quietly like they weren't sure if it was appropriate but felt it anyway. The gate agent looked relieved and furious at the same time. Inside the cockpit, my first officer looked up and asked if I was okay. I took a breath, ran a hand over my face, and said I would be. "Let's get them home," I told him, and that's exactly what we did. My voice over the intercom didn't shake. The checklist got done. The plane pushed back late, but it left. What happened next moved fast. Faster than that officer probably ever imagined. By noon, lawyers were involved. By afternoon, videos were everywhere. A pilot in cuffs, a knee to the back, the word impersonator spoken out loud. The airline terminated the security contract. Investigations started. Footage was reviewed. The findings were clear. Failure to verify. Excessive force, bias, policy violations. The officer was fired. I filed a federal lawsuit, $11 million. People love to focus on that number like it's the whole story. It's not. I didn't want a quiet settlement. I wanted the truth on record. I wanted accountability. At the press conference, I said what I'd been thinking since that morning. I followed every rule. I wore my uniform. I showed my ID. And I was still treated like I didn't belong. This wasn't about security, it was about assumption. So, here's where I leave it with you. Because the system proved I was the pilot. That part is settled. The real question is, how many people never get that chance? How many moments like this don't end with a supervisor walking in or a camera recording everything? Was this about safety or bias? Have you ever watched someone with power decide you didn't belong and act on it? I want to hear what you think. Drop your story in the comments. Argue with me if you disagree.